let's start off with our panel. We have Pooya, so he is the lead of the framework. We have Daniel Rowe, who's part of the team, and we have, of course, Sébastien, who's the co-creator. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. How do we start?
Well, we do have some questions if we want to get started with some questions, or if you all want to talk before then. Let's see, we have some questions. Well, I'll start with this one. This one's pretty, it will start us off. Why Nuxt? Yeah.
Why Nuxt?
Yeah, why use Nuxt?
Well, that's an interesting question. I would say if you're lazy at first.
It's a fantastic answer.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Daniel and Pooya, you want to add something on top of it?
So I think it really comes down to who you are and what your needs are. So this is me making a simple question complex, but absolutely. So if the zero config best practices baked in means it's really easy to get started with Nuxt. So you can just start if you don't want to take any more time to configure things. But I would also put the other point forward. So if you have quite a complex set of needs and you need to implement something that's difficult to conceive of when you start, Nuxt has all the hooks and ability to extend or configure along the way. So I think if you need zero config or if you need lots of customization and making it your own, I think both ends, Nuxt is a pretty good choice for.
And I couldn't agree anymore. I think it's exactly for the lazy kind of people. Even for myself, sometimes we really forget even what feature we implemented because it's already working in any website and it's just working. But when the time that you need something customization, you need to going out of the box, there are hooks for you that you can just extend any part you love. So that's at least for me.
Nice. Pooya, your sound is just a little bit low. Is there any way we can? Yeah, thanks. So we do have a follow-up question. Is it possible to learn Nuxt with a weak background in JavaScript?
Totally. So I think this is something that's common to Vue in general. So one of the things I love about Vue is the single file component. So the fact that you have what looks like HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, and that's a really, really good foundation for someone who's coming to JavaScript with perhaps a background in HTML and CSS, and they want to sprinkle some magic onto what they've already been making or creating. I think added to that, because Nuxt takes care of all of the extra wraparound things like creating routes or setting up a store, configuring Webpack, all the things that might also be complex if you're starting from scratch. Nuxt is a really safe environment to learn and hone and refine your JavaScript skills. Obviously, you'll want to be honing and refining and doing all kinds of cool things with JavaScript. And Nuxt is a really safe place to do that.
Awesome. Thanks for that answer, Daniel. Let's see, we have another question. I think this one's for Daniel. What is Nitro?
I am really sorry, by the way. I know you guys have probably heard plenty of me with all the teasers and things like that. But so Nitro, I would say, it's the new Nuxt server. It's the rendering engine. Maybe would be an even better way of putting it, because it's not necessarily going to be running on a standard server. It basically takes an incoming request and converts that to rendered HTML. So the core of it is JavaScript. It's standalone JavaScript. It doesn't have any Nuxt runtime dependency, for example, and it has a telephone operator layer to start with. It just figures out what bits of code it needs to load in order to handle the request. So some requests might be really simple. They might just be like an Express API, some kind of Node API where you just want to return a bit of data. Some might be more complex. Some might be a static file that you need to return. Some might be a JSON object that's a little bit more involved with your application, and some might be fully rendering some HTML. And so Nitro basically handles that, figures out what needs to go where, what bits of code need to be loaded in order to handle the requests. And it also handles any inter-code requests. So if your Nuxt app needs to call one of your custom APIs, Nitro will handle that as well. It doesn't need to go out to the networking layer. You may have follow-up questions if that's not been super clear.
Yes, we have a follow-up question about Nitro. Could we use Express with Nitro?
Well, yes, of course. That was one of the long-lasting questions that we had with Nuxt2 users, that we wanted to combine SSR application with backend frameworks like Express. So Nitro is coming with a built-in server stack called H3, which is super lightweight and is suitable for the serverless environments because it's not tied to any Node.js internals. But thanks to the mocking system of Nitro, you can indeed use Express to even run it in a browser service worker. So yes, it is quite possible, and also as well as for other frameworks. But probably you will just fall in love with the H3 framework because H3 is fully compatible with Express, but also more modern features, like you can directly return a JSON object that is serialized, or using native async await.
Excellent. Let's see. When will Nitro be stable?
Okay, that's probably a hard question. So Nitro is an amazing project. We put lots of effort on it. In regards of stability, we have to see how much the community is ready for it, because the way that is considering how the packages are being used and like not using Node.js only packages or only some modules that are runtime only, it needs their support. I would say it's more dependent on the community and ecosystem, how fast they grow to adapt with it. But I can say Nitro code base itself is pretty much stable because it's based on the stable software. It's basically wrapped around rollup and some great plugins and H3. So as soon as we start Nuxt public beta testing, you can actually try and use it in production environments. And if something goes wrong, we can quickly figure it out because the most major problems and questions are already solved.
Awesome. Let's see. We have another question. So with Nuxt, when should someone use Vue 3?
Well, when you want. If it's about Nuxt3, then you'll have to wait for a month. I mean, using Vue 3 and Nuxt at least, but you can start playing with Vue 3 as soon as you can and enjoy. Learn as much as possible about the composition API and the philosophy behind it, and you will be up and running for Nuxt3.
Awesome. So we do have a couple questions about versions that Nuxt3 will be using. What version of Vue, the Vue router, will Nuxt3 use?
So that's version 4, which is the future release of Vue router. So it's currently being published to NPM under a Next tag, and that's what Vue router, that's what Nuxt3 uses.
Awesome. So it's the same question for Vuex. So what version of Vuex will Nuxt3 use?
That's me, sorry. I have the baby crying behind. The latest, we tried Vuex 5, and we're also working with Kia to make sure it works perfectly. Also discussing about the revive and hydration function of Vue 3. But we already have it working, as well as Pinia from Eduardo.
Nice. Let's see. When should we migrate? There we go. Should we migrate to Nuxt3 or Bridge? Ooh, looks like we lost Pooya.
Well, I think Daniel can answer that. Oh, he's back.
Oh, sorry for connection drop. So the question is when to migrate to Nuxt or Bridge. That's an exciting question. I think when the Nuxt Bridge project was public, that's actually, as its name saying, it's like a bridge between Nuxt2 and Nuxt3. And for migrating every existing project that is already working with Vue 2, you can directly start to migrate to Bridge and see if something is wrong or not. And finally, if it's more risky for bigger scale projects, because it's simple, just a simple module, you can just switch it on and off and regularly check that is your project ready for Nuxt3 or not. And at the end, for the enthusiast people that want to directly try Vue 3, and if you are brave enough, you can start a fresh project using Nuxt3 that is leveraging actually full benefits of Bridge, in addition to the new things we have, including Webpack 5 and Vue 3 and the other application improvements. So it's pretty much depending on what kind of project you have. If you want going to start a new one, Nuxt3 is the answer. If you have a large scale application that's depending on many things and you want to risk less, you can use Bridge to have most of the features.
Thanks, Pooya. Let's see. When will Nuxt3 be stable?
Well, I think Pooya, you can answer.
Sure. I think it really depends on your help, the community help, when we start public, because we discovered most of the issues we already have had in Nuxt3, and it's a huge rewrite. Basically, we took like 4 years to develop something, and we started from scratch to be compatible and also new features. So it really depends on the feedback of the community, but we are so hopeful to end of this year, we can announce it as stable and start using it in production. And hopefully it can also help the Vue ecosystem itself to adopt more of Vue 3, because right now a low percentage of packages are depending on Vue 3 and more libraries in support. But I believe we can use Nuxt as a platform to push it forward and make everything in the Vue ecosystem ready and stable for Nuxt3.
Awesome. Can't wait. Can we still use runtime modules with Nuxt3?
Okay, so as a context, Nuxt modules are kind of an addition. They are using Nuxt hooks to listen to different lifecycle hooks of Nuxt. And like, for example, we start the build, a module can do something. We saw an error, a module can show something. We are listening to the server, a module can start a SSH replicate, or they can just intercept and change the response. This concept and the modules concept was mainly designed for the build stage. Basically, Nuxt is a build tool. You write your source code, Nuxt bundles it, and makes it ready for production. Before Nuxt Nitro project, it was also possible that modules also live in the production. So they can also, in the production, start hooking into different things and, for example, change the response. This model has to be changed in Nitro because basically we are making everything wrapped and ready for production into one bundle that is independent of Nuxt. And this means that modules are not runtime anymore. They should do everything at build time and make the project ready to go. So runtime modules would not be possible for production builds. Actually, they can be in development and build time. And any additional logic that they want to inject in the runtime, it can be using Nuxt plugins or either Nuxt server middleware that are now part of the Nitro. So it's possible to use runtime modules, but in a different way.
Thanks, Pooya. All right, next question. Will Nuxt3 be able to only build pages that have changed?
So, and this is getting at the highly hotly demanded concept of incremental static generation, and the answer is yes, but in a slightly different way than the question asks. So what we're doing is let me step back for a second. So Nitro enables us to have a per route, per page caching decision. So you can decide that certain routes of your app are going to be built statically at build time. Certain routes of your app are going to be cached, for example, with HTTP. Others will be generated on the fly every time. And some, for example, might be generated once on the fly, and after that, cached, just as though they had been generated at build time. So this is, I think, what the question is getting at. So you can effectively build and generate your app, and then when a missing page, a missing dynamic route comes in, we'll just generate the page on the fly, and then it's statically included in your deployment. Now, these things are really, really dependent on platforms. So what we're providing from the Nuxt end is integration with the platforms that exist, and highly customizable caching layer support. Anything more to add there, Pooya? What do you think?
No, that's pretty much of it. There is one spoiler that we are adding some new feature called page level route caching options. So this way we can have a truly hybrid application instead of making everything static to be generated just one time at the build time. They can be on the runtime. So if one page content changes, we can change the strategy for it. For example, one page would be more frequently changing, so we can regenerate it more often. But of course, it's pretty much depending on the platform as well, that what capabilities it has.
Nice little spoiler there, Pooja. Let's see. All right, so we move on to the next question. We have, okay, so use Nuxt3 or Vite?
Well, use Nuxt3 with Vite. That's Nuxt2 with Vite. It's possible as well. Vite is not a competitor of Nuxt, and Nuxt use it under the hood as a build toolchain or development server, but we do have this whole module ecosystem, pages system, that a lot of people try to do it also on top of Vite, but Vite is not made for having this plugin that can change itself into the core, and this is just a matter of time. But I think we are going and we want to push a unified ecosystem for the whole Vue community, and Nuxt being a foundation for this, as versatile as possible and extendable too.
Awesome. All right, so what's changed in Nuxt CLI, Nuxt3 CLI?
Okay, so can I go with it? Nuxt3 CLI is I'm one of the projects I'm so much excited about it. It's like, as much as I love Nitro, I love this Nuxt3 CLI, which is called Nuxtjs. The main change is that it's not tied to the framework anymore like other modules. This fresh start is combining its scaffold engine that is actually merging functionality of create Nuxt app, and with one more important addition. When you are basically using a create pattern, like you are starting a new project, you have to choose, like, you need Typescript or not, you need Access module or not. But usually the case is that during that project, you will just figure out, okay, I just find that I don't need Access anymore, or probably I need Typescript now. With this Nuxt CLI, we have this choice to do this after creation of project. Also, because it's global and standalone, you can just use it everywhere. It's quite lightweight, and you can still upgrade it. And in the future, it will be also integrated with the DevTools. The reason it's called Nuxtjs is because it's now a new interface for Nuxt that is capable to be more than used in CLI environments, but also starting initiating DevTools, or the API of it used as an extension for IDEs. So basically, it's some very exciting and new project comparing to the traditional Nuxt2 CLI.
We have a follow-up question. Will the new CLI set up TypeScript by default?
So I can't answer that. Basically, both Nuxt Bridge for Nuxt2 and Nuxt3 already support TypeScript by default. So without any setup, you already have TypeScript. And one more spoiler is that thanks to the great work of Daniel, we have some magical TypeScript generation. So you don't even need to register types, but just add a module and the types are there. Or even more than that, they can be dynamically generated. The new CLI has some hooks that just gathers that information and generates them. So it's pretty much still under runtime, still of just generating a configuration. And the default TypeScript config is in the new starter template.
Thanks, Pooja. All right, what is H3?
HTTP. H3 is actually an in-house solution. I kind of I was bored. We had some starter source code Nitro to try to get rid of things like Express because they are pretty much big and depending on many legacy and Node.js dependencies that's making the bundle so bigger. The idea behind H3 was to make not make another HTTP framework because of course there are great stuff like it cannot just compete with something like Fastify. Fastify is well designed for a backend integration and implementation. It has a major set of plugins for example, for connection with database. But H3 is written in a way to be compatible with the legacy server middleware. So we do not reinvent the wheel and we can have maximum compatibility with something like server static. Like we don't need to necessarily write them because we are making a new framework, but it's super lightweight and probably the only framework that is not dependent on Node.js and but is an HTTP framework. And it's super fast. It's even faster than Fastify. It's like I was super excited like a few weeks back. We was doing some benchmarks and it was like it's a big thing to say, but for bare minimum benchmark, it was the fastest HTTP framework in the world. And yeah, it was super exciting for us to see some results. And on the other hand, we are having these modern compatibilities like native JSON support, and best of all, it's already inside Nitro. So just to start a project, you already have it.
Awesome. Thanks, Pooja. We have our next question. What's changed in dynamic route generation for Nuxt 3?
So there's some really cool features there. So long asked for is patterns within dynamic routes. So you don't anymore have to have a completely open pattern like _slug.vue. Instead, you can actually have some text. So you could have something like user dash, and then you have square brackets slug square brackets .vue. And so that means you can create really cool and file system based routes. We also have a spread operator for slug, which lets you match multiple paths, multiple directories down, and yeah, there may be one or two more that you'll discover for yourself. And it's not maybe quite the question that you were asking, but we also, I know I've mentioned before the possibility of having sort of hybrid routes. Imagine, for example, you're on you're using a static site. So you have this concept of extracting your API calls and saving them as a payload, and doing that in advance so you don't have to hit your API. With Nitro, we have the possibility of doing that for dynamic routes on client-side generation, on client side as well. So even for routes you didn't generate at build time, if you're navigating on the client side, rather than have to say, oh, well, that's completely client-side based, we have to make a fresh API call, we can actually just call Nitro and say we need a payload. And Nitro handles the matter of generating that payload and serving it up just as though it had been statically generated at build time. That may not be what you were asking, but it's definitely a cool feature that I feel.
Like there's... Thanks, Daniel. All right. Are there any changes with fetch or async data?
Yep. So we are bringing a lot of the data fetching, data handling hooks into one place, with basically giving them all the features that the previous separate hooks had differently. That would be great news if you were trying to figure out the difference between new and old fetch, which is a particularly confusing conundrum for Nuxt 2. Added, I think, to the fact that we have got actually a native browser API called fetch. Doesn't help things any. So we have a new composable called asyncData, which handles everything. It can block navigation if you want to do that, or it doesn't have to if you don't want to do that. It will work in any component throughout your app, and it can and it will sort of can fetch the data in advance and then make sure that it doesn't refetch. For example, when you hydrate things on the client side. One of the key differences at the moment is that we ask users to create their own key for if they want to use asyncData directly. But we also expose some zero configuration hooks on top of that, like useFetch, which are a little bit which don't require quite as much in the way of passing arguments to them.
Thanks, Daniel. All right, which feature of Nuxt 3 are you most excited about? I guess that's for everyone.
Yeah, I think I said it during after my talk. It's about suspense and the ability to fetch using our composable in any level, from layout to page to components, and change the user experience as you want.
For me, of course, other than Nitro, is the new CLI as mentioned, because it's really opening new possibilities, and Nuxt is all about developer experience, and this is a gateway to many of new possibilities, things we can do in the future.
How about you, Daniel?
I feel a bit of a Johnny One Note, but I absolutely love Nitro. I really like the possibilities that it opens up in terms of edge rendering. So making things happen closer to users and much faster than really you could previously consider possible. I think some of the deployment targets that we're going to start unveiling will be really exciting. And Nitro is a really flexible framework for unveiling new features too.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. How does one try Nuxt 3 in beta version?
Well, then currently we have the private beta. So Vue Core team member, Nuxt community, module authors, and Nuxt partners are currently testing. We don't want too many questions at first. When I see the chat, there is a lot of questions every minute. We want to make sure to be able to answer on each one. And we want to be at first with the Vue experts and people that know Nuxt very well or use Nuxt in production with the heavy teams before opening to the public. But anyway, 12th of October, we'll be able to use the public beta.
Thanks. When do you think it would be a good time to use the C API instead of the Object API?
Now, definitely. But I mean, not because you have to. I just love it. I mean, it seems pretty logical to me. I love being able to extract logic. I like the sort of context hidden in the background. So the idea that you can extract just some code and do something like get current instance and pull back the component that's actually running this bit of code in its setup function. That's really useful. And actually the pattern in general, we've extracted into a package called uncontext. So you can, if you like that way of dealing with context, you can do it outside of Vue and actually just run it in your normal JavaScript apps. But if you like the composition API, I would go ahead and use it. Yeah. Make sure stick to the Vue composition API hooks. That's probably going to be your easiest path of migration. And Nuxt Bridge is going to make sure that we have identical APIs as much as possible across Nuxt 2 and Nuxt 3 for the composition API, so that it's really seamless. You can have a project running Nuxt 2, switch it over to Nuxt 3, and the composition API side of things doesn't have to change.
I would also recommend to check out Vuex, where they have a lot of nice composition API functions. So it's also a nice way to start refactoring some plugins to use the composition API in a Vue 2 project.
Nice. All right. What is the best feature in Nuxt to use over other frameworks?
I mean, obviously we're here because we love Nuxt, and I'm sure we could point to lots of things. But I would say that, I think people have good reasons for using other frameworks too. That's totally fine. I think it's exciting to be part of a bigger movement of frameworks doing our best to push web development forward, make it easier for devs. I think we all learn lots from each other.
Cool.
The module. That's the one I love, because I know I can extend. I like to be able to extend any part of a framework. I don't want to feel locked into it, and that's what we achieved with the Nuxt module and the hooks. But it's super advanced. Most of the users we never have the need of it, but they are really powerful.
Awesome. Thanks. Let's see. How do you plan to differentiate better Nuxt.js versus Next.js?
I will ask Next to rename.
I don't know if it's worth just adding something to that hook concept. Have we done a spoiler yet for the runtime app, Pooya?
I guess not yet.
Not yet. Well, I've spilled
not yet. We do have. Yeah, we do have a couple more.
Basically, so if you've been using Nuxt hooks up to now, you've been using them on the build time Nuxt. So there is no more Nuxt hooks once you are in production. Once your app is running on the client side, there's no more hooks. Well, there are in Nuxt 3. So it really opens the doors to all kinds of cool ways of integrating with Nuxt and building out things with modules that inject plugins that interact with those hooks.
Yeah, I have to say it's also a really exciting thing that you can also extend the composition API pattern to something further than just a view. We can make plugins using it with composable utilities and also server middleware to import composables for them.
Nothing to add.
All right, let's see. All current modules in Nuxt 2 will be running on Nuxt 3. Is that correct?
So that's a really tricky question. Actually, we are really trying the best, because there are many breaking changes, and we provided compatibility layer in several places, including the module container itself. So Nuxt Kit instance would be automatically injected for legacy modules, and also legacy layer for the plugins. So they hopefully work if you are not doing something crazy inside them that wasn't expected. And there is also a simple migration guide to fix the remaining issues. So the best effort is to make them working, and they might be broken because of the dependencies, including Webpack 5 support, Vite support, or Vue 3 support, which for all of them there is already a solution. There is a great work by Anthony for creating bundler compatible plugins so if you want to support something for Webpack, you can easily make it for Vite. And also for the Vue, there's Vue Demi, same with Anthony made. So either they are compatible out of the box, or if they are not, there is an easy path to make them compatible.
Excellent. All right, we have a good one. I'd like to know more about the future of partnership between Google Aurora and Nuxt. What kind of collaborative additions are in the works?
So Google Aurora and Nuxt, So Google Aurora are seeking to improve performance across the web. They want to make the web faster and user experience better. And they're working with a number of frameworks. We're really glad to be among that list at Nuxt. It's something we appreciate. And it's, I think, one of the things that I particularly appreciate is the feeling that we're part of a bigger group. So it's not just that we're at Nuxt trying to make things faster or seeking best practice, but actually there's a group of us from lots of different backgrounds, different frameworks, and obviously the Google Aurora team are right there in the center of things, looking to think about what best practices and how we make the web better for everyone. So that's really exciting. As far as specific collaborative editions, I think just watch this space. I think there's some really exciting things coming, but I don't want to steal any thunder.
Thanks, Daniel. That sounds very exciting. Let's see, what is the purpose of Docus, and can you share some features?
So Docus started when we worked on Nuxt content. When I created the Nuxtjs.org documentation back then, I wanted to use Markdown, but I didn't want to use a Webpack loader to use Markdown. I wanted to use Markdown as an API. And when we released Nuxt content, we have seen a lot of people wanted that, a lot of developers wanted the same features. And then we created this documentation thing. And then also a lot of people wanted to have something like this. So we decided to have a team working fully on Docus, which is a preset. It's a framework on top of powered by Nuxt. Essentially, you actually have all the Nuxt features. It's also using Nuxt Bridge, which also allows us to push Nuxt forward in a way to beta test. And it does have this Markdown syntax. You can basically create pages with Markdown, and we push it even further by directly creating this MDC syntax, where you can use Vue component without HTML. It's a new syntax. We're going to open source Docus in October as well. And on top of that, we're also working on this admin editor, which is where you can edit your Markdown live, have this live preview. And the goal of it is for us to be able to update Nuxtjs.org, or anyone being able to edit our website, publish, we create a pull request, and we will be able to collaborate more easily and faster. That is what's behind Docus, and a lot of nice features, such as a powerful theming engine, so we can easily create themes and share across the whole community.
Oh,
Voilà.
Nice. Thanks, Sebastian. Let's see, what steps would you recommend one takes now with Nuxt 2 so to make easier migration to Nuxt 3?
I would say the first step would be migrating everything from CommonJS to the ESM syntax, or more preferably TypeScript. Why not? That's probably one of the most important things. You can try Nuxt Suite and Nuxt Composition API right now. While the API would be a little bit different, but you will pretty much making it more ready for Nuxt 3. And very soon with Nuxt Bridge, that's the actual step for migration to Nuxt 3.
Thanks. All right, we have, I don't think the whole question will display, but I'll read it. So will module authors be able to add Serper API endpoints programmatically when creating Nuxt modules? Being able to just add one Nuxt module and get an API and client to connect would be I'm assuming, killer feature.
Exactly. Yes. So the key thing to keep in mind is what Pooya mentioned earlier, is that modules will run exclusively at build time. So that server API endpoint needs to be able to be injected then. But yes, I think that's one of the key things we want modules to be able to do is add server API endpoints.
Awesome. So now we're actually have a question from a Nuxt module author from Vue Plausible. Is there any way to still get on the private Nuxt 3 beta? I guess I can wait until October 12th since it's not that far out, but getting it to work before can't hurt.
I already contacted him on Twitter and added it in the next patch. We use Vue Plausible, and I think it's also a nice module in a way that it's a Vue plugin that can be enhanced and attached to Nuxt without having to create another package. So definitely check out how it has been done. You simply need to create one Nuxt file or Nuxt directory inside your Vue library.
Awesome. That's great that you were able to reach out.
I'm trying to answer all the questions in parallel on the chat. It's super hard.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine.
Challenge.
Great job. I'm sure everyone's appreciating it. Let's see. One of the areas where I had challenges beside the usual Nuxt leadership was in testing. Yes, there are dedicated helper utilities by Nuxt for testing apps and the Nuxt command line. Ooh, wait, that one did cut off quite a bit. Let me move to the next one and I'll come back to this one with the full question. Are there plans to integrate web workers in Nuxt, including rendering to achieve great performance?
So I think the answer is yes. So even now, Nitro has a service work. Now, obviously there are a number of different kinds of workers that are running in the browser. At the moment, Nitro has a service worker target. It's highly experimental, so please do not go and migrate your production sites to this. Service workers have different implementations across different browsers, for example, so they don't work sometimes in incognito mode. You wouldn't want your site to be entirely dependent upon whether the user's accessing it in incognito mode or not. But yes, this is something we're exploring, and with things like H3 and the way we've built Nitro, it's totally possible to have a server sitting in a browser worker that actually renders the page.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniel. Let's see. So the previous question was, one of the areas where I had challenges besides the usual Nuxt leadership was in testing. Yes, there are dedicated helper utilities by Nuxt for texting apps and the Nuxt command line regarding dev instances. But for a full end-to-end guides with default testing stacks like Jest, I had to look elsewhere. What can we expect concerning testing in the future?
There is an ongoing project in Nuxt organization called Nuxtjs Utils. It was at first more considered for testing the modules and the build side itself, so it has more utilities for that. After we make Nuxt Republic and using NuxtKit, we will introduce more end-to-end testing utilities, but I would personally choose something like Cypress, which is specifically designed for something like this and has so decent utilities for Vue testing, for actual project end-to-end testing, and using Nuxt test utils for more things like unit tests and module side tests.
All right, let's see. We have a couple more minutes left. Let's see how many questions we can get through. Will there be more built-in support for PWA in Nuxt 3?
One part would be part of the Nuxt meta, would be kind of built-in part of the Nuxt 3. So you have these meta helpers that was part of the PWA module built in Nuxt 3, but the rest is in the PWA module.
In which cases could migrating from a Nuxt 2 app be too complex or not worth the effort at the moment?
So nothing occurs to me to make it say it's too complex, but it's worth saying that Nuxt 2 isn't going to be missing out. So our aim is to bring the features that we're talking about to a Nuxt 2 app, so that you don't have to be making that difficult decision between whether to migrate or not.
And let's have this one as our last question. Can you talk a little bit about the significant performance improvements with Nuxt 3?
Well, I think it's I'm careful when I'm talking about the performance and the numbers. So for the silver, I will say hell yes. It's much faster. Like it's a whole new framework, and like the startup times that Daniel already spoiled, the times and also Sébastien talked, and the size. Regarding client performance, first of all, we have Vite and Webpack 5, which are also quite faster for development mode. Regarding the performance of the production in the client, there are some progress, especially in Vue 3 itself is tree shakeable. Many of the features are now opt-in. For example, we don't have something like transitions built in. You can even disable Vue router if you want something super small. And also thanks to the native syntaxes and modern targets, the client bundle is also smaller. But yet I would say the significant part of the performance improvements are for the server side, and the client would be in practice because the actual overhead is your source code itself, not the base framework. So it would be almost probably the same, with the exception of the performance improvements of Vue 3 itself.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank all of you so much for taking time out of your day to help us out with this and talking about Nuxt. I know everybody's super excited about what's coming, and thank you so much for answering all these questions. And thank you, Sébastien, for taking those questions in the chat as well.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, everyone.